not a dividend.
It's a tale of two clans.
Now, your losses are on someone else's balance sheet.
Generally speaking, airdrops are kind of pointless anyways.
Unnamed trading firms who are very involved.
I like that ETH is the ultimate Ponzi.
DeFi protocols are the antidote to this problem.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Chopping Block. Every couple weeks, usually four of us get together and give the industry insider's perspective on the crypto topics of the day. So, quick intros. First up, we've got Robert, crypto connoisseur and captain of Compound. Next up, we've got Tarun, the Gigabrain and Grand Poobah at Gauntlet. Then we've got Emin Gün Sirer, the emperor of Avalanche. And lastly, myself, I'm Haseeb. I'm the head hype man at Dragonfly. So we are early stage investors in crypto, but I want to caveat that nothing we say here is investment advice, legal advice, or even life advice. Gün, it's great to see you.
Great to be here.
I know that you have had a harrowing few weeks with this whole drama. We talked about it on the last episode, just to get everybody caught up and really quickly jump into the meat of things. So there's this guy named Kyle Roche, who is a class action lawyer who was caught in some kind of sting video recording operation, basically saying that he is the attack dog of Avalanche and he's suing a bunch of Avalanche competitors. Ava Labs came out and basically said that actually Kyle Roche was one of like a bunch of lawyers we used. Kyle has since been largely publicly disgraced. Both Kyle and Ava Labs have both basically denied that they have a continuing ongoing relationship. And Kyle Roche apparently, since our last episode, it's been announced that Kyle Roche withdrew from the open class action cases and was let go from his own law firm, Roche Friedman. So if I'm understanding correctly, the Tether lawsuit, the Bitfinex lawsuit, Tron, and Binance class action lawsuits, all Kyle Roche is no longer active on those lawsuits. So I know that this has probably been an insane few weeks for you. What's your give us the industry insider's perspective? Sure.
When I heard what was on that site, I was taken aback. I was incredulous, and my first reaction was, "This is crazy." And it's so out there that it's unbelievable, that I don't think anyone's going to take any of this seriously. So I still hold that position. It's just way out there. And Kyle Roche is a lawyer of the many lawyers that we employed. It's one of the lawyers that we employed in the early days of Ava Labs. We've since, of course, cut all ties with him. Kyle was evidently trying to impress someone. And to do that, he decided to make up this whole Walter Mitty world for himself, where he's doing things and in the middle of everything and suing this and that. The one time we told Kyle what to do was the time after he sued Solana. And we learned about it from the press, and we were immediately on the phone with him saying, "What the heck are you doing? You can't be doing this." And he refused any advice. So we told him not to sue Solana. And my general counsel then wrote a long piece saying that the core argument behind that class action lawsuit is entirely false and doesn't have legs. So that's the fact pattern. We don't sue our competitors. We have nothing to do with those lawsuits. So that's the short of it. The long of it, of course, is Kyle has sued a lot of projects, has made a lot of enemies, and he got trapped into saying things that are utterly false. I will add one additional fact to the fact pattern. He admitted that he lied, and it's also been entered into court proceedings. So when he's withdrawing, he has actually written out that there were complete fabrications and falsifications made. So I think it's over. I'm over it, and there's no material to those. But there was a joke before that when Tarun was late, that he'd better be here on time, or else I'll have him sued.
What is it about people named Kyle in crypto?
That's a good question. It's a good question. Wait, are you saying there are other Kyles who are problem children?
No, I'm just saying there's lots of Kyles in crypto who are loud, who like show up in the news.
Okay, I thought you might have been calling out a specific Kyle.
So amongst all of the false statements that Kyle made, were there any truthful statements in the video recordings that you saw?
Sure. So I'm supposed to extract from what I saw. So let me be clear. I didn't have the heart to watch all of it because it just triggered me way too much. But he was employed in the early days. But just about every statement I heard was, a small nugget of truth, maxed out to its extreme, like from the percentage of coins that he supposedly holds to the impact he had to how he did whatever he did. It's just all just extreme far out there. So yeah, he was our lawyer in the early days, and that's about the extent of it. He did represent us in a handful of cases. Let me be clear. He represented us in a bunch of lawsuits, routine commercial things. Contractor, we terminate the relationship. Contractor wants more, this and that. They sue us, whatever. So those kinds of things. As far as I can remember off the top of my head, he was involved in about 6 different cases, and they were all defensive. And then there was one lawsuit where he represented me against somebody who made statements about my involvement in some organization that I have nothing to do with. So that was the extent of our involvement.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this on the last episode. Jill was mentioning that if you're in crypto long enough, you come across people who are just like, I was in the room when blah 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 happened, and I was like,
I'm Satoshi Nakamoto.
I mean, Ethereum has how many co-founders?
Every
day it's inflating. It's like
Exactly.
Few dozen co-founders, right?
Exactly.
They all played a critical role.
But the thing is, if I try to count the number of people who've told me they're an Ethereum co-founder, it's much more than a few dozen. That's like the craziest part.
Easily 3 digits.
In many ways, that's the problem with decentralization, is that we don't have very formal structures around these things, so people are just free to kind of say whatever. And it's common enough in startup. I mean, I can't tell you how many people I've met who tell me that they're Elon's closest friend. And it's just like, okay, well, you can't all be right because he seems very busy. So
he has to get the memes from somewhere. So you might not be his friend. You might just be the meme supplier.
Oh, that is true. That is true. That's a different kind of friendship than the normal kind. But so do you feel like this is mostly blown over?
I think so. I mean, what's there to blow over? It's just a bunch of made up stuff. There is not much I can do. I can control the things I build. I can control the things I do. But I can't control what other people outside of my organization will say to the rest of the world. And then the only thing you can do when they say crazy things is you say, no, that's not the truth. This is what we did. And I'm hoping every time I underestimate the world, it surprises me in a pleasant way. I think people are decent. They understand what can happen. And the truth finds a way of coming out. So I think this is over now. And it's over in my mind. I think we've had a very strong reaction. We clarified the record repeatedly. So of course there will be attempts to bring this back again and again and again. That's okay. We'll deal with that. That's just a minor hassle for us.
So tell us about the ICP angle, because I know that this is another interesting angle to the overall intrigue.
Yeah,
that's right. That's
the insane clown posse is behind it.
Insane. So I don't really have much to say on that front. Kyle sued ICP, and I didn't actually know that Kyle had sued ICP until this event. So that's all I know. And so that's that connection. And Dom also has some kind of beef with us because he thinks he owns the word subnet, and we use the word subnet. And that's fine, whatever. Like, he can get upset at us. We didn't know he was using the word. I think the word is pretty clear the way we use it. We have a different definition for it. He's free to use it as well. That's totally fine. So that's the angle I know. And there's also a BSV angle, right? So Kyle had sued, was involved in the lawsuit between Kleiman and Craig Wray. And so, again, it's my loose understanding, may or may not be factual, that whoever did the recordings was involved in BSV. But I don't know. So
really?
This is all way outside of.
How did he get involved in all these cases? I'm like, either he's a genius lawyer or something. Like, there's got to be something there. He's like somehow in like every hands.
I feel like a lawyer can just file a class action lawsuit against anyone they want, and that's one of the problems with the legal system that we have in America.
It's one of the things that is actually nice about the U.S., that the government doesn't have to prosecute you. If there's something bad happening that affects enough number of people, that you can take the matter into your own hands. So I like that thing. Then it becomes very litigious, and that, of course, is not good. In any case, this is all beyond me. I have nothing to do with this stuff. We build systems. Kyle does lawyer stuff, and we needed defensive work. We hired him, and haven't used him in an offensive capacity.
Well, anyway, I think we've said enough about this.
Yeah.
At this point, I feel like it's kind of blood from a stone with respect to the story. It's just been a slow few weeks that we have to.
I don't know if it's been slow.
Has it been slow?
I feel like it's been pretty slow.
It
feels like it's been a very slow few weeks.
I don't think that's true.
Well, what is the exciting thing that's happened in the last few weeks?
Well, I feel like people are speculating on the one big event of the week.
That is true.
The merge?
The merge.
Oh, the merge.
So I mean that is the one big thing.
That's
so
a
the
big
merge
event.
today. We're recording this on September 12th. The merge is slated most likely to go live on September 15th. So for those of you who somehow don't know what the hell's going on, the merge is when Ethereum transitions to full proof of stake and abandons proof of work, except for the one ETHPoW Fork, which I guess is still supposedly going to go on.
I think it's going to happen.
It's
Actually,
definitely going to happen, but I think they're going to.
Will it succeed?
I feel like it's going to happen, but they're going to mess it up
Cool.
completely.
So just real quick high level stats on the merge. So net issuance is expected to be between 0 and 0.5% annually after the merge. Just for reference, Bitcoin today is about 1.8% annual inflation. Ethereum pre-merge, not including fee burn, was about 4.5%. Fee burn obviously has been super volatile, but it's somewhere in the 4% range. It's going to go down to about 0.5%. So you're going to lose 90% of the ETH issuance after the merge. And of course, energy usage is going to cut down by like 99.95%. So it's going to be basically totally green and very ESG after the merge. Anybody following the ETHPoW stuff? Does anyone know what's going on there?
I loosely follow the ETHPoW stuff. Here's my take on the situation.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a huge amount of proof of work mining hardware designed for Ethereum that has to go somewhere. In general, Ethereum Classic is not a great use of that mining equipment. And a lot of the miners think that the easiest thing to do is to keep on mining Ethereum with the existing state and just fork it and direct all of their hardware towards continuing proof of work for a fork of Ethereum. I think the bigger issue is that there's a lot of hardware that has to go somewhere and is depreciating quickly, and miners are at some point either going to have to, realize that the hardware is no longer as useful, or, will a blockchain into existence that has value. And I think they're trying to will a blockchain into existence that has value. Now, the approach that they're taking is to fork the entire state of Ethereum, not fork just the Ether balances, but to fork every single smart contract. And I think it's going to be a total cluster.
I'm in their Discord, and it already is. They have like a private Discord, and I will say it is.
Oh, you're in a private Discord?
Yeah, they're like DM to get into our private Discord if you want to help QA or RPC. I was like, sure, I'll QA.
I see. Okay, interesting.
And
is Gauntlet going to support the ETH
no. This is me as an
This is you
anon.
personally.
I just wanted to see what show I'm dealing with. I don't think
All right,
anyone knows.
leak the Anon alpha.
The alpha is basically they haven't been able to sync a node fully with all their changes. It's like not bitwise identical up to like some point. So there's just some points at which they are observing some contract state that's different than ETH mainnet, and they haven't been able to fix it, and obviously they don't have much time, and all the miners have to sync. So one thing is, if they can't get their client to be bitwise identical, you can't just take an existing archive node and use its data up to the fork block.
Wait, what else are they changing that it wouldn't be bitwise identical?
Well, yeah, there's a lot. There's like pre-compiles and stuff that have been added that they're trying to remove. They also changed all the miner fees. So like the base fee is going to MinerDAO. It's not being burnt anymore. They're taking all the Ethereum Foundation's ETH and sending it to themselves.
What?
Yeah, there's like all sorts of shit.
I did not know this.
But they fucked up all of that. So the contracts aren't bitwise identical also. So anyway, they're trying to give miners access to some like private RPC node they're running that they're debugging on, but like not giving out the full thing because they still can't get identical.
This is a terrible way to fork the blockchain.
This is ridiculous.
Why? I mean, it's not a terrible way to. Yeah, it's not the best idea. It's not what I would have done.
Wait, let's hear the Goon defense. Let's hear the Goon defense.
How would Goon fork Ethereum?
I wouldn't fork Ethereum. First of all,
If you did.
If I did it.
Let's say you wake up tomorrow morning. You wake up tomorrow morning and you are the head of ETHPoW.
No, that kind of a fork is a hostile fork. I would never do it. But if I were them, I'd start an L2 powered by POW, and then that'd be it. I'd just be like, hey, this is an L2 done. And that would be the sensible thing to do. But have you guys looked at the fee calculation in Geth? It's just layers upon layers of very complex code. Like, I'm not the least bit surprised to hear that they screwed up that stuff.
The base fee burning thing, like removing that, actually like just changed some.
Changes so many
tons
things.
Of
Yeah,
other
it's
shit.
just so
like
subtle.
the mempool. One of the bugs I saw in the Discord was the mempool priority queue. Do you remember like in like the early days of DeFi, there were lots of these bugs that people found where like the Geth didn't order equal keys in the priority queue for gas. Like
I remember this. Yeah, people would like grind.
Yeah.
one.
So like basically they have bugs like that coming from their base fee change.
Oh wow.
So like they can't replay correctly, which is like gonna like how are you gonna mine on that? This was just me going in for a little dumpster dive, and I was like, all right, great.
That's fat. Wait, how much of the communication there is in English?
There's a lot of U.S. miners who are asking questions.
Okay.
Like they're all the random U.S. miners who are running GPUs are like sitting there, and they don't have any Chinese people working there. They're all in Texas.
I see. But the development is all happening in China, right?
But the U.S. miners are like running the nodes and trying to like test that they're existing. They have code bases too for managing the DevOps of like, oh, when do they spin up and spin down things? Like, how much should they allocate? And like all of that's not working because they can't actually sync the thing.
I see. Wow.
That's why I only know the problems from the perspective of these people trying to run the nodes. I'm sure there's even more shit in the development. This is just from that.
They got 3 days.
No, I don't know how you're going to sync in time. Like, I actually think they're just going to do kind of what you're saying. Like, they're going to give up on it and just run a separate chain and try to sync it. Yeah.
Right. Wow.
Because they want to send all these, like, random accounts to themselves.
Yeah, that's not the right way to launch the fork.
I mean, they did it too late. That's the problem, right? Like, Chandler Grow came out and said it, like, 3 months ago?
Yeah.
And they didn't even, like, get enough momentum. Come on. This is the slowest moving railroad car you've ever seen. You could have like tried to have started like a year early.
Right. And this is the same thing BSV did, right? Didn't BSV also basically take a bunch of Satoshi's? Well, no, they also took a bunch of Satoshi's Bitcoins, right?
Yeah.
Oh, did they?
Did they not?
They did?
It's Satoshi's vision.
Yeah.
It is, but I didn't think they actually usurped the coins.
I'm pretty sure they did.
Yeah, I believe they reassigned
They
it.
talked about it. I don't know if they did it.
Oh man, you probably know better than we do.
I do not.
They're like your arch enemies for whatever reason.
No. For whatever reason, they love to attack me. But no. No, I haven't followed closely enough. I didn't think they took the coins though.
I mean, if you're listening right now, just tweet directly at Haseeb.
That's right.
BSV
if you're part of the BSV community and you're mad about
shows up on his phone
these accusations, just go ahead and flame me into the ground. Okay, so whatever. ETHPoW aside, sounds like it's a dumpster fire, but whatever.
It's kind of a little bit embarrassing to all the people who did forks in the past. It's like kind of shows forks are, to your blog point, like very hard to orchestrate with smart contracts.
That's right. Well, they're trying. They're trying their best, and so it's whatever.
But the main show is the merge, right? We should talk about the merge.
Yeah, I mean
that's a great thing.
So here's the thing. I'm kind of like. So we were talking to Laura about the show. Laura was like, "Oh, you should make it about the merge. You guys should talk about stuff about the merge." Sure. What else is there to talk about? Like, we've all talked about the merge for like years. Now it's going to happen on Wednesday or whatever, and then like the day after Wednesday, you're going to wake up and you're going to be like, "Oh, the merge happened. Now what do I have to look forward to in life? Now that the merge is done."
All the features that are promised in all these EIPs, 4,000 and up.
Yeah. So like, okay, so we got to wait for like the actual changes in the
that we want, right?
Exactly.
Like
no, I
48,
agree.
44, all these things like unclear what their
what is
development
48,
timeline.
44? Explain it to everyone.
So there's a couple paths that Ethereum wants to take. So Ethereum, if you didn't tune in since 2019, was basically like, hey, our scaling plan is to go sharding, which is to, have many shards. They synchronize on the beacon chain. They've decided to go the Cosmos/Celestia route more so than the pure sharding route, and have a data availability layer where basically, there's sort of this way of verifying that someone has the right data without you actually storing all of that data yourself. It's called like sort of a data availability proof. And so they want to add that to Ethereum so that applications don't need to actually like store as much data, or hopefully. And so there's a bunch of proposals which, in some ways, some have argued that they are block size increases. Some have argued they're not. I'm not going to wade into that, or I'll let the BSV people handle that. But it basically separates blobs, which is data that's written that is not computed on necessarily, but within the transaction it's submitted, and data and compute separately. So separating compute and storage, which a bunch of blockchains already do. Doing it on Ethereum is a lot more hairy because you need to make it backwards compatible with all the existing storage. Now, the upshot of this for rollups is that rollups only have to do compute when they post a fraud proof, usually. If they're fraud proofs, they're working, and whatever the end state of rollups. Let's I'm saying
this fantasy world of yours is amazing.
T goes to infinity of rollups, not T equals now of rollups. That's what I'm saying. So rollups do post these blobs, right? Because the state has to live on this chain, and I think like there's still a lot of debate as to whether Ethereum will be able to implement this in a fast path and like actually get this running, or is this going to be like 1559 where, you know, like burning the base fee? Ironically, a form of lock-in against forks, as we've learned in some indirect way by being a very complicated piece of code.
Right.
But yeah, are they going to implement this? How are they going to implement it? It's still a big, and so I think the post-merge roadmap is the bigger concern. The merge is just a narrative for investors who don't want to really understand how technology works to buy into it, because they're like, oh, like
Wait,
supply
what?
line.
That seems unfair.
I disagree.
Oh, all these ESG funds can have like the current version of it. None of the features that were promised a long time ago are even close to being.
Well, I agree with that.
Yes,
It's just like we went from this list of 500 items and we did like 2, and it took 10 times as long.
It's very simple. Merge and then surge. And merge comes before surge.
General Robert Petraeus.
I feel like they nailed the messaging. The fact that you get on the show just the merge, the surge, the splurge, the verge, the verge.
Have you
very
seen
good,
that crazy flowchart diagram that Vitalik has of this? I mean, there's so many things on that. This is like playing chutes and ladders, and you just got to the first ladder.
Well, unfortunately there's no way to fast track. You can only lose progress apparently, which seems like what we've done. I mean, remember, like the merge was supposed to be done in 2017, right? That was the original Ethereum roadmap. Was that they believed? I mean, that's why the difficulty bomb was put where it was, because they believed that within 2 years.
No, I think it was 18, but
Okay, maybe it was 18.
but close, yeah.
Okay, yeah, but
I remember discussing how to shard blockchains back in 15
yeah.
with Vlad and Vitalik, and it's been a while.
So good. You were there. You are, the OG among OGs when it comes to seeing the development of smart contracts. Give us, like, back in the day, how did people think about proof of stake back when Ethereum was first getting put together? Tell us the story.
The entirety of that thinking was predicated on matching proof of work. So everything that you see in Ethereum 2 is there because people felt that they had to one-for-one cover POW and have a mechanism that corresponds to what's happening in POW. So, things like slashing, things like, just the way the discourse happened, the framework in which people think about these things is based entirely on the Bitcoin way of thinking and trying to match Bitcoin's features. So, and there was a lot of talk about sharding. And, it's a good idea in general. If I leave a PhD student alone in the first month, they will be like, oh yeah, to scale something up, you got to shard it. In the early days, the focus was entirely on sharding, because how else are you going to get any kind of scale up? But if I leave a PhD student alone for a year, they'll come back and say, let's not shard, this is hard, because it opens up a whole lot of issues, especially on the public blockchain, because now you get people who are picking and choosing their shards. You get, once you shard something K ways, you had one problem, you've got K shards, now you've got K plus 1 problems, right? The K shards each and every one of them, plus the inter-shard communication problem.
Yeah, K squared, really.
Or K squared, right?
Yeah, it's really K squared.
It's really K
K
squared.
minus 1.
This is a really K factorial pretty easily. So yeah, no, it's in the early days, it seemed like maybe it was solvable and so on, but Tarun just summarized it really well. Like, it starts out with a big vision, and then when the push comes to shove, you just jettison everything. And so now we're back to, but I think that merge is a fantastic thing. I cannot wait for it to happen. One of the biggest outcomes from it will be the fact that we'll no longer talk about the merge. So we'll save a lot of time.
We're going to move on to the surge.
We're going to move on to whatever comes next.
It'll become even slower news cycle.
I'm more excited for all these excess GPUs to just be used for stable diffusion, and which is
will definitely
generally.
be one
I
of the
was
biggest
talking to
changes,
some friend of mine who works at this like miner in New Jersey, and they've literally turned all their ETH miners into ML excess capacity.
cool.
Like, I
Is
feel
there
like a
a
lot.
business model there?
Effectively, you're just competing with OpenAI, right? Because like, the question is, will the open source thing, will it be good enough like Linux, where like being the infrastructure provider like AWS is good enough that like it will beat the like really optimized?
Someone's going to stick a token model on this.
I mean,
They already have.
I mean, they already have. Yeah. There's like a million people pitching
Golem?
this.
Wasn't Golem?
Numerai did it.
Goal
No,
was
not
the
Numerai.
original
Numerai was
processing
hedge
and rendering.
Yeah, it was rendering.
No.
Yeah.
But no one has actually focused on the AI thing of like, oh, like how valuable is this particular graphic to you, and I'm going to upcharge you for that. Because like I think that's where that's where we haven't seen. That's the innovation of this cycle.
Compute. You're talking about non-commodified compute.
Yeah, it's just GPU. Stable diffusion will run on GPU.
Well, no. What I'm saying is that like so normally almost all compute today is commodified, meaning that the compute is not charged to you differently based on what you're doing. And
sort of, but
like it's not value-based pricing. It's commodity pricing.
You still bid in auctions for preemptibles, right?
Yeah, but it's still a commodity.
Yeah, but it's still treated as a commodity, right? Something that is not commodity price, something that looks at the value you're creating with it and charges you based on the value you create.
1% of your NFT sale based on weighted output, that would be non-commodity.
Exactly, but that's not commodity
I just
pricing.
more mean that I think there'll be auctions for there's like a fixed amount of
totally. I mean, commodities are auctions, right?
Yeah. But totally. What I mean is like currently, if you look at the pricing of like OpenAI API call or API call, those uniform across all queries. There's no competition for that, and I actually think that will change.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
That's the thing that will change now that this is sort of like this race where like a lot of people are doing these stable diffusion startups.
So if you had to estimate the cost of computing one call to like stable diffusion in like thousandths of a cent, what would you estimate it?
I think right now it's free, actually. There's like a bunch of free services.
I agree that it's free right now.
If we ignore all the subsidies that are coming
but like the underlying cost.
I probably in the range of like tens of cents.
No, tens of cents. You can run this on a laptop.
But for quite on an M1, not on a like really.
Sure.
Not running on
it doesn't.
Let's say it's 1 cent.
Yeah, maybe a cent, maybe a few cents.
If it's 1 cent, I mean, I'm just waiting for someone to like make a movie out of this because like 60 frames per second, right? Like, I'm serious.
Google's been demonstrating some really interesting. Okay, by the way, we're getting like way off topic.
No, this is the good stuff.
Yeah.
Wait. We're coming back to what the token model for this thing is. Wait a minute.
But the number one thing is that like so Nvidia has probably been the number one company that's been rocked the most by crypto, right? Because if you remember, 2017, their stock price went crazy.
Well, they got a fine from the SEC this year by not disclosing that crypto was a material impact.
That's right. I feel bad for them, although they've also made a ton of money from crypto. But now it looks like GPUs are finally going back to like regular pricing. Like their supply shortages are going away. Normal gamers can buy GPUs without like 2x markup on secondary markets. So that is one big change. And the other thing that's happened is that all these random proof of work coins are starting to pump. So Ravencoin, I read, is up like 100%.
Wait, why?
Wouldn't it be the inverse? Because when you can mine it so easily?
Yeah, exactly. Because if you have GPUs, you can mine this coin. Same with ETH Classic, right? Why did ETH Classic go up? Because if you have GPUs, you can mine ETH Classic.
Okay.
And so
who are the buyers? You've just told me the supply side.
I know. This is what happens. This is what happens, is that people who don't understand that, they see this leading indicator, oh, hash rate's going up, therefore it's more valuable, so I will buy it. Or either that, or the miners are engineering pumps.
Hash rate is a Veblen good? That's your claim?
In the short term.
Bitcoin, I agree.
In the short term, it is. It's not a Veblen good so much as this. It creates momentum that causes people to buy, and then the miners dump into that buy pressure, right? Like this happens all the time. Every time that you see these rotation of hash rate, the price pumps because people are like, oh, finally this thing is coming to life. Like Ravencoin, I don't know anything about Ravencoin. But
wasn't that the Overstock.com related one?
Yeah. I don't know.
Do you have any disclosures to make?
The only time I've ever heard the name Ravencoin is from proof of work miners who are rotating.
No. The reason I heard about it is, do you remember there was this scandal about this company that was trying to make an ETH ASIC? This was bottom of the bear market. Used 2019, Linzhi, Linzhi. And they like wrote this blog about making this ASIC that will like dominate ETH mining, and it never happened. Those people were the Ravencoin people.
Oh, okay.
That's the only reason I've ever heard of Ravencoin.
I only hear about Ravencoin from miners. I've never heard of anyone normal tell me about it.
I found out about it from 4chan because people were like, Patrick Byrne is buying it or whatever.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Who's Patrick?
Or maybe
the Overstock.
Oh, that guy.
Yeah,
that guy.
Yeah.
He's an angel investor in it.
I feel like the big nugget here is, how often do you read 4chan?
Great question.
Which boards?
I was an active reader of Biz in like 2017 or so.
Really?
Really.
Okay.
It got really Wojak-y after that, and I stopped reading it. But back in 2017, I read Biz all the time. Great crypto forum back in the day.
So tell what is the 4chan perspective on crypto from that you remember?
I haven't followed since 2017. But back in the day, there was a lot of great memes about basic attention token and Link.
That's what Link did come out of.
Link was
4chan.
very strong, unfortunately.
Also, wait. Does anyone ever think about how basic attention token is a really fucked up name? Because it kind of sounds like the Stanford prison experiment, but like as a token, like basic. You don't have basic attention. You need this token to have basic attention. Like, sorry, I forgot it was even that was what it stood for. Because people just say
why is the basic
should've-
word in there?
It should have been Brave, but here's my 2017 recollection. I could be like way off base here. The idea was that it would be the standard cost of an advertising unit. Hence, they were trying to value your attention for some
That's
unit
very
of time.
1984 though. Valuing
Yes,
your
I agree.
attention.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And they were trying to come up with like a canonical, like, empirical unit for attention for like one advertising impression.
This is a very 2017. Like, look,
Yeah.
we're going to take this like broad concept
Yeah.
and turn it into a token.
But in retrospective, it does just really sound like some like means of controlling your attention token.
yeah,
That was the
struck me
idea. That
as
was the
a-
idea behind it.
I knew Brendan, so I knew the etymology. It never struck me as that.
It didn't.
No, it's not. They're not trying to control you.
I mean, if they could, that'd be great. It'd be a great business model if they
I've
could.
been totally brainwashed, of course.
Yeah, exactly.
Brendan controls
Yeah,
everything,
exactly.
I think.
Clearly, his basic attention is very expensive. Yeah. It's already been bought out. by the time we've
Disclosure,
got it.
I'm not a holder of BAT. in
Okay,
any way.
okay. Good to
Yeah,
know.
Bat and Ravencoin. This is how you know you're in the bear market when people bring those names up.
Hey,
Yeah, exactly. exactly. I can't say a word on any of these topics. I'm just so afraid of, so you never know when people are going to get upset at you.
Yeah, well, that's kind of the theme of the show is that we just say random stuff and the people
Yeah,
get mad at us.
Emin hates Ravencoin and BAT. That's what I got from this.
It's going to be your next scandal. It's going to be your
I
next
was
scandal.
just breathing a little bit sigh of relief, and
That's
now
right.
we're
That's
back.
right. Well, so actually, here's a question for you, Gun. Do you feel like the beefs that you've gotten into with other founders has been good for you or bad for you?
On the net, absolutely bad, absolutely horrible.
Really?
Of course. And,
I don't get that impression.
Why?
I feel like beefs between coins is like actually it makes news. It's like WrestleMania.
Right. I found out about you and I respected you all the way back when you were ripping on Bancor. In
right, a long
way
time ago.
back in the day. I was like, who is this Cornell professor ripping on the Bancor ICO?
Yeah, no, was it on the net? It's a big negative. You just make enemies for no reason. And, I feel compelled to say the things I say because, I feel like this is the truth as I know it, and therefore I have to say it. And then it gets me in hot water, and then suddenly there's like some kind of altercation. It's kind of unnecessary. A lot of these people are people I like, but sometimes it's just people I really hate, and they're doing a scam, and then they attack me. So either way, I've gotten used to it. But if I could do it over again, I'd keep a low profile. If I could, my personality wouldn't allow this. But if I could redo my life, I'd be a, go with the flow kind of guy. That's not me.
I do not believe you.
I can't do
You're
it.
not selling this well.
I would want to.
Whatever happened to Team Rocket?
Team Rocket, they disappeared. They did their best. They did their bit. Every big movement needs a creation story. Every big one. And the biggest gift any group can give you is anonymity. It's like they give you something, take it or leave it, all on the surface. They don't want credit. They don't want anything else. Here it is. And if we like it, we like it. If we don't, we don't. So Team Rocket disappeared, chose to disappear. Like, what's Kaiser Soze? Right? Just bam, vanish.
Fair enough. All right, well, move on to the other story that keeps on giving besides the merge, which is the tornado sanctions.
Oh, yeah.
So, I don't know that there's been much specific news except the two big items that I saw this week. So first was that Huobi, the big Asian exchange, delisted every major privacy coin. So they delisted Zcash, Monero, Decred, Dash, and the three other ones that I'd never heard of.
Wait, sorry. Decred counts as a privacy coin in 2022?
Sure.
I guess. I don't know. They had some privacy feature. I forget what it was.
They had a broken version of like a Mimblewimble additively.
That's right. That's right.
But it
that's
didn't.
right.
Like there were so many bugs. in
Wimble
it.
doesn't provide.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, yeah.
But
Well, is Grin
you
still
shouldn't
around?
get delisted for that.
For a future you don't have.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess they still have Litecoin, right? Litecoin incorporated Mimblewimble, didn't they?
Litecoin's too big to fail.
I guess.
The
I guess
Litecoin
that's true.
Foundation army is big on Twitter now.
Is that right?
Yeah, I don't know. All I know is Charlie Lee is like, I was like just as research, I was trying to like watch, normal TV coverage of crypto because I have no clue what people think. And Charlie Lee is on like every single one of these
Really?
like news channel episodes lately, being like talking about the Litecoin Foundation. I was like, they have a foundation that's active, like.
Wow. I'm learning so much about you guys. Like, you read 4chan, you watch TV. Like, it's not what I expected out of the two of you. Yeah. Wait, what's your guilty pleasure?
I have no idea. I don't even know.
You don't even know. Fine. All right.
Dealing with
I'm on
lawyers.
TikTok all day. That's my
Lawyers. There you go.
Lawyers, there we go.
suing on the content is your guilty pleasure. Okay, got it.
Shouldn't
All right, well-
lawyers be happy that you're late because they charged you for being late? I'll never get sued.
Well, speaking of lawsuits, so the other big news in Tornado Land was that Coinbase is bankrolling a number of lawsuits against Treasury. So basically,
Are they
Coinbase.
separate lawsuits or is it one?
I thought there were
US
several.
Treasury?
Yeah, against Treasury for the OFAC restrictions.
I thought it was one lawsuit with 6
people.
plaintiffs.
Oh, there's
Yeah.
6 plaintiffs. Oh, I see. Got it. Okay, that's why I was confused. So they're backing a lawsuit against Treasury. There's a number of plaintiffs, each of whom had some kind of sympathetic story for. So they basically did the thing that you're supposed to do, which is find sympathetic plaintiffs who have like clean stories, not just like some dude who from North Korea and is like, hey, why are you taking my money away? It's somebody who's like. One of the stories was a core dev who was getting paid for something, and one of their neighbors was like, "Hey, I heard that you're in Ethereum," and then he was like, "Huh, I should like use Tornado to like hide the money that I'm making because this person apparently was like tracking something I did on chain, like some NFT purchase or something." There's some story like this.
Also, I think Preston. This is Preston, right?
I don't recall.
Preston Inland. I think this is him. He also had this thing where like there was some point Vitalik sent him like a large amount of ETH to pay for Prism, not for and that's what funded one of these client development groups. But I think people inferred that as like he got that, and it like I think that also led to some security things for him with like people trying to impersonate him and send messages to Vitalik to say like send more money.
Oh.
So like he had a lot of good reasons. Like
Yeah,
they were just
yeah.
like people were spoofing his identity a lot.
Yeah,
Right.
there's you don't have to have a good reason to want financial privacy, right?
Yeah.
Let's just
Well, you
establish
do need
this.
to win a court
need
case.
to win the
to win
court
a court
case,
case, you
yeah.
do need to have good reasons. But generally speaking, you shouldn't have to have good reasons. But anyway, so so it was Preston Van Loon, and I mean the overall picture. So in the last episode, I came out kind of calling out Coinbase and saying that I thought they were going to roll over. I turned out to be wrong. So mea culpa. Congrats to Coinbase for sticking up.
Agreed.
Somebody said that this is the best PR that Coinbase could have possibly done, and it was like surprisingly cheap for how much credibility it won them, and I think it's well deserved. But somebody else was telling me that they thought actually this was a really bad move by Coinbase, or sorry, I should say not a bad move in terms of Coinbase for PR purposes, but a bad move with respect to getting Treasury to back off. And the way that they put it to me, and I don't know if I agree with this. I don't have enough context. I don't know enough about how these kind of things play out. What they were claiming to me, this is somebody who spends a lot more time, with people on Capitol Hill. I don't know, Robert, you might have a better perspective. Is that Treasury is people too, and when you sue someone, they get mad and they get scared and they dig in and they what would have been best from the industry on the whole is to give Treasury a way out and to help them save face in trying to back off from these things. Because clearly, the reaction that they got was not what they expected. And there are probably a lot of people scrambling, trying to figure out oh crap, everyone seems to be really pissed about this, what do we do? Going straight to a lawsuit makes it very, very difficult for them to actually walk it back, if that's in fact a possibility. Now maybe it's not, maybe there are things we don't know about Treasury digging in their feet, but this is like the nuclear option, is the way that it was described to me. I don't know if that is a good assessment.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an escalation, right? Yeah. And, I think it's too early to tell whether it's going to be successful or not. I think there's a lot of merit to the lawsuit that was filed. I think there's a good chance that the arguments come through. I think from what I've heard that, a lot of the folks in Treasury didn't necessarily even understand that there was a difference between Tornado and other mixing services. And they didn't appreciate the difference between a smart contract-based system versus a centralized mixer. And they are radically different, and that a lot of people are just caught off guard by the backlash. And it's hard to say whether it's going to make them more willing to concede that they were wrong or less. I would hope that it would be a wake-up call to say wow, if it's creating this much pushback, we clearly didn't do our homework enough on this. So I'm optimistic that the lawsuit's actually going to help. And I don't think it's going to cause anyone to dig in their heels. I hope that people are able to say, like, you know what, there wasn't enough homework done. We thought all mixers were all mixers. It turns out that, you know, we're getting into base layer, you know, and smart contract censorship here and like raising issues that were not anticipated at all. Nobody wants to see North Korea succeed, right? Like, I don't think anyone's advocating for the illegal uses of it. You know, it's just a matter of, wow, more care needs to go into making, you know, existential changes to how sanctions work, going from sanctioning people and businesses to sanctioning autonomous programs.
So I'll bring in some bit of history here. I'm totally in line with what you said. So do you guys remember the 90s when like the internet was getting to be bigger and bigger, and all these forums, like including 4chan, were beginning to pop up, and you could go anywhere and you could say anything. Senator blah 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 is a jackass or what have you. And so this really pissed off a lot of people on Capitol Hill. And there was a lot of talk about one concept that some of your viewers may not have heard about, but it was called the driver's license for the internet. There was legislation attempts to mandate a driver's license for the internet. And the core reason being that old people on Capitol Hill could not handle other people saying whatever the hell they want on the internet. And so this mobilized everybody, the internet, you know, the old IETF crowd, the Internet Engineering Task Force. Everybody there got mobilized to try to educate the lawmakers and say, look, there's an ethos associated with the internet. There's also a technology. These two things don't really allow what you want to have done here. And if you try to do this, you will not achieve your policy aims. It's a parallel to the exact situation we have with Tornado Cash and privacy on blockchains. And in that case, the techies won. Right? We have the internet we have today. It's not censored. When law enforcement wants to do something, they have the hooks that they need. And it's sort of a co-evolution, right? They evolved to a point where they got the hooks that they needed, and the technology gave them access in just the way that they wanted. But they end up getting those hooks from the edge, right? They never had to ban what you do on a carrier. Like AT&T never has to look at your packets to see, you know, they don't listen to your phone conversations to see if you're doing an illegal convo. They don't look at your data. And but now with this Tornado Cash thing, we're going towards a move where somebody has to look at what you're doing on the blockchain. So there are great parallels there. And in this case, on the blockchain side, they stepped outside of historical precedent and they got the backlash. So we'll see how this plays out. But I do agree that the lawsuit does notch everything up a notch.
Yeah, it's a fascinating analogy. What do you feel like, you know, from your perspective, what do you feel like it is that the industry needs to do better in order to get the same kind of the same kind of community on board with this idea that, like, hey, the internet doesn't have this notion of a driver's license, and blockchain shouldn't either.
Right. So that's a separate conversation, and I've been thinking about it a lot. So this is the blockchain community is strictly smaller than the internet crowd, right? And there is a very vocal crowd that is anti-blockchain. And some of them are hardcore techies too. They're like, I've got my stock options, I've got my cushy job at large blue chip company, and I hate the blockchain. And they hate it with a passion, right? And it's really interesting. You see this culture clash. And so what does it take to get all these people on board to say, look, we're all fighting for the same thing, financial freedom, breaking down monopolies, an even playing field. And so we need to do a lot better in reaching out. We need to do a lot better at policing ourselves. And the maximalism that came with some of the earlier systems do not help us, right? This whole, like, we're going to take down governments, there's only going to be one coin for the entire world, et cetera, that extreme libertarian idealism, et cetera, it doesn't really win you friends. You really got to admit that there's a bigger world out there that you need to integrate into. I think, as a group, we need to back down from one of the core narratives in blockchains, which is, I will build you a single chain to rule the world. I think people have to admit, as an industry, we have to admit it's time to admit that there can't be a single chain that suits every need. What you build for the US will not satisfy the people in Europe, will not satisfy the people in China, et cetera, et cetera. So when we were building Avalanche, that's why we went to this different architecture with multiple chains. Avalanche is not a single chain. It's not 3 chains. It's actually a multitude of chains. So that was part of our vision. And it's an underappreciated fact that the industry has to grapple with.
I guess the other thing about this whole concept of suing Treasury and making this into a big fight, right? Like, so it's clearly an escalation of what came before. The other thing it brings to mind is that like Coinbase seems to be, for whatever reason, right? Like it feels to me like FTX versus Coinbase. FTX has been super friendly. They got into this spat with the CFTC when they were doing the hearings about having this verticalized. I'm sorry? Oh, that's right. Oh, yeah, for FTX US and their insurance stuff. But I feel like Sam has been very collaborative with government. And it feels like Coinbase has been like, I mean, Coinbase like went to the mat with the SEC over the Coinbase Earn thing. They are like digging their heels in on a lot of the listed assets on Coinbase, saying like, hey, if you think these are securities, come and get it. Like because there was when the SEC issued what was the one where they listed like 7 tokens and they said they were securities?
9 tokens for the insider trading.
For the insider trading, that was right. It was the insider trading case where they dropped these things, statement that 9 of these tokens were securities that were traded. Coinbase said we're not going to delist them unless you bring a case.
I think the one that's not in the U.S. it's much easier to.
Yes, I think because
being in the U.S. is way.
But FTX has a big U.S. presence. And
they have
Sam's
a huge
American.
U.S. presence, but
it's so
their
arm's length.
HQ is offshore.
Yeah.
Right.
You don't have to like fight for survival in the same way. I feel like
that's true.
You could worst case.
Okay,
what's the worst case? You get rid of the U.S. unit, which volume-wise is not.
Yeah, it's a small portion.
So
of
it's like I would argue that it reflects that corporate structuring difference that like Coinbase can't get out of that. They're forever a U.S. Even if they tried to move, they would just be like a U.S. citizen trying to get rid of their citizenship.
All of their team is here.
Yeah,
they're a publicly traded corporation. In
most of the revenues here.
Like they've picked, their jurisdiction. And personally, I don't think you should have to, look offshore to like be a successful company.
I fully agree with that. I fully agree with it. It's such a red flag for me in my book that a company that's based here, started here, drew its human resources from here, ought to be here. So if somebody's going off, it's a red flag. If somebody has to go off, you're driving them offshore, that's another red flag. It's red flags all around. But it also, I'm curious about that, how it came to be that Coinbase, with such a large U.S. presence, has less influence on the Hill than FTX. So,
is it clear that they do, or is it just that Coinbase is horrible at PR? That's like the thing I've never been able to grapple with.
I can't tell. I think it's pretty clear that we're still a very young industry. Like the internet industry, when it first started, even after having lots of money, had no idea how to talk to lawmakers and how to talk to regulators. So I think there's a learning curve to this stuff.
I think the first mover has the worst time at doing that.
That's also true.
It's like the oldest sibling.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Second player.
Yeah, people chill out a little bit because they're like, we dealt with Coinbase, we know what it's like.
I'm definitely not trying to say like there wasn't some skill or planning in FTX's moves, but they had the huge benefit of watching Coinbase fail so many times.
That's true. But also like the parents chill out a bit after the first day.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I spent a little bit of time talking to lawmakers, and it's interesting how united the blockchain-interested lawmakers, both in Congress and in Senate, they are. Like regardless of which ideology, right? So both Democrats and Republicans, they get it, and so I was very pleasantly surprised at the level of sophistication that these people have. I think something in Sam's favor is I think his parents are lobbyists, so I think that's part of. Was they the law professors? Okay.
Lobbyists.
I see.
All right.
Well done. That tops out the show.
The show's over.
We're definitely going to put that in the intro reel from now on. It's a great line. Wow.
I mean, okay. One funny fact of a news article of something I learned this week, since we're talking about FTX, is so. I guess FTX invested in Scaramucci's recent
Skybridge.
fund.
Yeah.
But then Skybridge invested in FTX. And it's like there's lots of this type of stuff in crypto, but this was the most publicly like funny like like you go to both the websites. And
I mean, not to be cynical about it, but if you buy 30% of Skybridge for like $30 million, then direct $100 million of assets into your own vehicle that you're charging 2 and 20 on,
and fees buying on your exchange.
Right. You basically come out ahead for free. Very cynically, I think it was a brilliant investment if it was so self-serving.
I just think it's funny. People used to be very careful about hiding all these like recursive loops that live in crypto, and this was one of the more blatantly
Yeah,
obvious.
one of the more obscene.
Yeah.
You know.
Have you guys spent much time with Mooch?
No.
Have you?
Have you?
I have not. I know Thomas spent some time with him.
Okay.
Oh, all
It's a
right.
different
Yeah,
universe.
I mean, I don't know how he ended up in this industry. Like, it seems very random to me. I don't know what his. I don't really understand what he brings to the table.
We're
but-
growing. Like, the space is growing.
Everybody
Yeah.
wants to be in the crypto industry.
That's true. though.
He has run a successful conference. I'll give him.
Isn't it right now?
Yes.
Yeah, it's right now.
Yeah.
So it's think about it this way. As you go down the level of sophistication of the investor table, you have this huge stack that still hasn't come into the space, and you need the people who tell the narrative on the way down.
Well, the last piece of news, I mean, did you guys see today that there was a rumor that Fidelity was going to start directing retail
Yeah.
capital into crypto?
Oh, I did
Really?
not see this.
I don't know if it's founded or unfounded, but I was reading that on the internet today.
Novo was
Was this on the biz forum?
Yeah, this is not on Facebook. For the record, I've not been a biz reader in about 5 years.
Okay. You just get the digest.
Yeah.
Fidelity has a strong group. I would not be surprised. That's good to hear. So the other thing, Tarun, though, that I've seen, it's not so much that the big folks moved in and then the smaller fish are coming in. So I've been seeing So first of all, when I was a professor, all these funds that were coming into crypto would come to us. And they'd be like, hey, we need some academics, some trustworthy individuals who can tell us what we need to pay attention to as we make investments into crypto. So I knew hedge funds were coming 6 months before they were coming in. And in a similar fashion, I started seeing really large but very slow players, starting with Canadian retirement funds, start to go into crypto.
Investing in Celsius, making
man.
really
When you say Canadian pension funds, I'm like, oh no,
they
that doesn't
haven't
end
had a
well.
great track
They
record.
do not have the best track record, that's true. But there are large funds, sources of money that are coming into the space, even in a bear market. So
I just mean, but those people rely on this like other layer of fees industry like Cambridge Associates and people to like direct them
Yes.
onto what to invest, and like that's Scaramucci is. He's like he's like the
asset allocator.
Geppetto below some other Geppetto.
All right, that's a good description. Double Geppetto. Okay. All right, so last question before we wrap. Let's say September 15th, the merge goes through, it is all successful. What do you do the day after the merge? Robert, what do you do?
eat steak.
Eat steak.
Hopefully, I.
Wait, are
already-
you vegetarian?
No.
Oh, you're not,
I was gonna
okay.
say hopefully I already was just drunk, and so.
Oh, you're drunk. You're going to just be drunk through the merge.
Yeah,
Got it.
hangover. Like,
So you're like alcohol, your blood alcohol level is like going to converge with like the difficulty level.
Yeah, exactly. And then at that point, it's like, oh man,
That's
probiotics,
when you pass out. Yeah, you pass out right when the merge
probiotics.
happens. That's perfect. That's perfect. Good.
I'd probably be partying with Tarun. I
There you
want the
go.
merge to be done. I want the merge to be done. I'd stock up.
Robert will invite us for steak. We'll both come over hungover and not be able to eat
Steak
any.
and eggs. How about that?
Okay, that sounds good. I'd stock up on food because after the merge, like these proof of stake systems have failure modes that are different from proof of work. Proof of work is a very robust, very well understood technology. Once you switch to proof of stake, I can tell you firsthand that it is not the world's easiest. And you can have, and Solana people will tell you the same thing, right? You can have loops in there, you can have recursive feedback loops that cause problems for you. So I'd stock up on popcorn. It's going to be interesting.
Okay. So
Oh, I thought you were saying stock up on food because the economy goes up. Oh man, we're like
Stock up on food.
canned goods.
Full on lockdown if proof of stake doesn't work.
Yeah, that's right.
No, it'll work. It'll work for
Yeah,
sure.
you just start like all the plumbing goes out, like the lights, and then the lights, and then it's pretty soon it's
The
painted
world
on
doesn't run on Ethereum yet.
Yeah, it's getting there. It's getting unless except in Dubai. That's the one, the smart city stuff.
Do you remember the Simpsons episode on Y2K? Where like Y2K hits and the street lights are shooting lasers at people. We're not quite there yet.
This week, actually, speaking of news, I just learned about the 2038 problem.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Wait, what is this?
I just learned about this week. It's
This
like
is
the
like
next Y2K. It's
It's the
2038.
next Y2K. This is actually serious.
Yeah, this is really serious. January 9th, I believe, 2038.
Yeah.
Like all time is calculated, since 1970. and we start to get an overflow on January 9th.
32-bit time people
32-bit
get out of here.
time.
Get out of here. Get out of here.
32-bit rollover. So the beginning of the Unix epoch was 1970.
Yeah.
And so it runs. You overrun the 32-bit counter in 2030.
How many people are using 32-bit
The
counters?
elevators will stop.
I need a lot of
and
old
they'll
shit.
drop you
A lot of
repeatedly.
embedded stuff is embedded.
Okay, all right. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to survive.
You don't want to be in a
I'll
city
fine. Yeah, exactly.
on January 9th, 2038.
Yeah.
Go
I'll
out
be,
into the woods.
yeah.
This is Y2K all over again.
I got it.
We will have
Okay.
switched them.
Closing advice.
It'll be fine.
Okay. Well, so, good. What do you think is probability the merge fails? It seems to be what you're.
0%.
No. You just telling us.
Zero,
You were just telling us
let
stuff.
me refine.
He's saying maintenance problems.
0% failure of the merge on whenever Thursday, whenever it is, and I would say 100% expectation. I would say of a liveness failure in the next 6 months. That's my guess.
That's a good prediction market.
Let's see.
I'll buy
But I'm hoping, obviously, that listen. I don't want this misinterpreted. I want it to, of course, succeed.
Yeah.
So, but I do know how hard these systems are to build. So let's see how it plays out.
And they have had liveness failures on testnet. So
On testnet, without any financial incentives to play funny games, right?
Yeah.
So
Or if anything, maybe an incentive not to play the games if you know of vulnerability, pocket it, and then hit it on mainnet and short the coin.
I don't think anyone's really that sophisticated, but we'll see.
I think the people who are that sophisticated are nice people. I think they tell.
I think the people who are that sophisticated are going to play like
Or they're North
MEV
Korean.
games instead.
Yeah.
yeah, but the real thing MEV game is like if the POW fork even kind of gets live and just like
That will be the king of all.
that's gonna be so
games.
fun.
That first
That will
block
be-
I
is
mean,
gonna be
I
the most
really want
valuable
someone
block.
to just make a bridge to the like the POW people. Their way of like saving face and becoming a layer 2 is to be like, oh, here's a bridge that we forked that you can bridge to, and like that bridge will be the ultimate MEV
That must be a
magnet.
terrifying piece of infrastructure to run that bridge.
Yeah.
It's okay, Taros was one node. so-
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Like,
Okay.
come on.
Well, we see how that worked out. Like clearly,
I
clearly
mean,
wasn't.
I don't expect anything less than similar for this fork based
Yeah,
on
yeah.
their Discord. Let's
Yeah.
put it that way.
Okay. Well, I think we're at time. Thank you very much, Gün, for coming on and sharing your wisdom and
Thanks for having me.
your optimism about everything going on. That's it from us. See you guys in a couple weeks.